tree.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
Do
it's
most bird watchers have those?
well. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing on this chilly Saturday morning? That's good. I'm John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside, and welcome to Lakeside Christmas Chautauqua Lecture Series talk for today. And for this morning, Kate Philibom will be our speaker and step into the daily life of Bethlehem through the nativity story. Kate will bring to life biblical and archaeological insights about family, geography, and village life using 7.5-inch Fontanini figures. I would ask if you please take a moment to mute your cell phone ringers and help me in welcoming Kate Philibom to Orchestra Hall.
That's great. Thank you all so much. Our family has been coming to Lakeside for 47 years, always the third week of July, and international. Everybody, we have family from Denmark and India that fly in. And for 37 of those 47 years, we've said, we should buy a house. So you know that story. But I'm glad to be here. I teach on Tuesdays at the Rhine Center during the summer. I'm a retired choir drama teacher. And you know, those of you that maybe have known teachers or taught yourself, when you retire, you miss the kids. You don't miss the administrative stuff, but you miss the kids. So I started coming over to teach here just because it felt really good to do that again. So I work at a Lutheran church in downtown Toledo called St. Paul's Lutheran Church, and it has a very interesting history. And I'm going to share a little bit about that story because it's a story of many large downtown churches. And eventually, I'll get to how we have gotten into a nativity festival, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how we're developing that nativity festival and the Fontanini figures and what that means in Bethlehem. So that steeple is the church in 1924. Some of these pictures are grainy, and this was a very famous Cherry Street, Erie Street festival right outside the church gates, and this little building on the left was the courthouse. So you can see how the church was so large and smokestacks in the back. This was kind of the hub of what was happening in Toledo in the 1920s. So here's the church, and this hub was the downtown area. And it was surrounded by Polish, Hungarian, Irish, German neighborhoods. Obviously with the Lutheran Church, a lot of those Germans were going to the Lutheran Church. In fact, they're within a good walking distance, there's probably 5 Lutheran churches. You know, they all had to have their own little thing. So here's another view of the church. And in 1924, the courthouse got built to that size, not the little tiny building it was before. And the architect was a very famous architect in the Toledo area, David L. Stein. And you can see the Romanesque columns, and he built many of the structures in downtown Toledo, if you're familiar with Toledo at all. So this is downtown Toledo in the 1920s, and Gloria Steinem's grandmother, Mrs. Perlsetter, was a very active member of the Toledo community, the first female on city school board. And so women's rights movement was quite active in the suffragettes. And so women had the right to vote, but in the church, it took them a few more years before women had the right to vote. And the first thing that they voted on, this was the parsonage. Don't you love this? The first thing they voted to do was tear down the parsonage and build a new structure. And in that structure were Sunday school classrooms and the ladies' parlor. And they didn't waste any money in the ladies' parlor. And this was for their Bible studies and their monthly teas. And at the same time, to show you what was also happening, this is the Toledo Club. That parlor and that building was designed by that same David L. Stein. He also designed this Toledo Club building. And so this is a dinner in 1932. These are the Toledo industrial magnets: glass, automobiles, gas and natural resources. This Toledo was transportation hub for a long time with the river and the railroad. This was the church choir by the 1950s. This church had grown so big that they couldn't fit everybody inside the church for services. They had to rent the movie theater across the street, the Paramount Theater, for Christmas and Easter. Isn't that a glorious shot? This was downtown Toledo, the very famous Titke's department store. Have any of you ever heard of it? Oh, there's a hand from Toledo. They served a very famous roasted coffee that was, the smell of the coffee was piped throughout the store through a vent system. That's one of the famous things that you hear about it. So, downtown Toledo, again, here's this Paramount Theater that they would rent, and the church is just on the other side of these cars over here. So, a thriving hub of downtown Toledo. Then we hit the 1960s. It's been so long that we have forgotten the impact of that on communities. And the best way that I can describe this, now this bus is labeled Dorr Street, and the best way I can describe this is the black community grew very quickly. That first slide I showed you, Hungarian, Polish, German, there was a great flight to the suburbs in the 60s, and the black community went from 3% of the Toledo population to 28%. This was segregation, this was a struggle for jobs, and people did not know quite how to handle that whole influx. And most of the black community settled on Dorr Street, except for one man. I don't know if I put him in here. Isaac Lott bought a house right by the Toledo Zoo. This is why I have the zoo. Also, David L. Stein designed some of these structures in the zoo. Mr. Lott bought this house near the zoo. 500 white men protested in front of his yard for many, many days. NAACP was called in. He had to have police protection. And we've just forgotten how much of an impact that had. Shortly after that, I-75 was being built through Toledo, and city decided the route of I-75 should go through this Dorr Street corridor, displacing 800 black families. So this then became downtown Toledo. People fled to the suburbs. And so these downtown churches that were once huge, people either chose to drive in or they went to, newer schools, newer restaurants, new churches developing in the suburbs. So this has been a big, big impact on the downtown scene. At the same time, Japanese steel began to be imported. So the car industry, which this was at the end of the 50s, end of the 40s, into the 50s, when women were really working a lot on that line, that employment plummeted also. So you just had a big issue in downtown Toledo. So a lot of these historic large neighborhood churches have all closed. Some of them have been converted into coffee shops or a bit of a retail community centers. So St. Paul's, for basically the last 30 years, has been in this position of what are we going to do? Shall we close? Or can we reinvent ourselves in some way? And so we've used the word transformation because a chrysalis of a caterpillar, when that caterpillar is in that state, it breaks down into this soupy mixture and eventually transforms into this, the adult butterfly that we know of. But the process of coming out of that chrysalis, it's literally breaking down its form. And to get out of that cocoon type structure through this small opening, it's literally pushing the fluid from his abdomen into the wings so that it can fly. It can't fly in that state. That process, it's breaking down, it's completely transforming into something else. So when you talk about a church trying to reinvent itself or trying to transform itself from what it had been, this is a pretty good analogy. You have to break down some of the traditions that you've been used to doing because it's not going to be that way anymore. So here's the church sitting there. What does our neighborhood look like now? 54% black, white, Hispanic, Asian. Now, in this area around the church, we have library, imagination station, Fifth Third Field, a government center, ice skating rinks, pickleball courts, the art museum. It's no longer a center of manufacturing and housing. It's tourism. This side of the church, 56% of the people that live on that side of the church live below the poverty line. The poverty line, that's a very low number. That's to be in the national or federal poverty line, you have to make less than $15,000 a year. This is an example of what the apartments look like. There's also a jail near us where people are staying. Let's look at this side of the church. This is the apartments on the other side of the church, $3,000 a month, closer to the river. 70% of those residents are single, ages 25 to 55. Here we are, right in the middle. Low income, high income, area of tourism and sports activities. So that was our first step. Now here's the church. This whole area right down the street from us is now under development for 250 new apartments. They were old buildings that are being redone, and it's going to be more retail area again. So what is our transformation going to look like? This has been a big project of the last 10 years. So we took that space built by those ladies in 1924, and we flipped it into a gallery. Now, I don't know about you. My husband's a Lutheran pastor. I don't know too many church councils that when you're debating whether your church is going to survive or not, say, well, let's make a gallery. It's not a typical reaction. But this is a beautiful, architecturally beautiful building. And so this gallery has been a way for people to get to know each other again, to meet with the neighborhood. We host many, many, many events. And because we're right in the arts area of Toledo, we have invited local artists in, and we've included a lot of artwork in the building. I don't see, each one of these little squares was done by a different artist from the group SIVA, Christians in Visual Arts. And so we host many events for them. We painted a mural outside. We were doing parties in the parking lot. Yes, we painted the historical building. And it's a bit of an unusual mural based on one of our events in the gallery was, instead of hanging art, we asked people with tattoos to come in and sit on stools as live art and to explain their tattoos. It was such an emotional night. listening to the stories. Everybody that has a tat has a reason why they went to the trouble and the expense of having that put on their body. It was such an emotional and moving experience that everyone decided, and members of the church decided they would ask a tattoo artist to paint a mural on the side of our building. So these flourishes are in our stained glass windows. This is his Luther rose. These little white swirlies are the Holy Spirit. There's a butterfly behind the bass player for Easter. And everything was looking great till we got to the 30-foot swan. And, you know, I'm there, my husband, I was like, where in the Bible does it talk about swans? I can't, you know, what Lutheran connection is there to swans? So we brought the artist in to talk to our arts committee. Toledo has Swan Creek, Swan Park, Swan River, you know, or creek, but Swan housing along the creek because we're along Lake Erie. And there's a lot of trumpeter swans and other swans that live in that area. But in the 90s, they died out. So the Department of Natural Resources reintroduced them in 2000, and very, very, very slowly, they began to adapt and adjust, and they're now flourishing again. This was the artist rendition of churches in downtown Toledo. Almost died out, and some of us are starting to reemerge again and plant our feet. So now we like our 30-foot swan. A heart gallery, and so we have a bunch of hearts. We had kids in this summer to paint a wall in the parking lot. Now, you're not allowed to put church names or things because it's a city wall. The city was glad for us to paint it, but you know, they put little hearts on it, but you can't put words from a church. So now this is 5K runs that run past the church. So we run out there and give out water. This is the LBG2 Pride Parade. We have, actually, this is from Lakeside. You see right here at the side of the hotel? We have 3 of these looms that we made on wheels, and we pull them outside for summer events, and we ask people to write prayers and weave them in, and then we wheel it into church and offer those prayers up during service. So one summer at Lakeside, I brought that over and sat downtown for a while. We build beds for kids that need them. We created a maker space for people that are living downtown that don't have room in these small apartments to use tools, make repairs, art classes. I think they were building birdhouses here. And in the summer, because if you remember those statistics, we don't have a lot of families near the church. But in the summer, we run youth camps. And by and large, these are people that want an urban experience. So they'll come in for 3 days and they'll stock a food bank. I'll do faith and art event with them. They might build some beds. And then on the last day, they'll go to Cedar Point. That's kind of their treat. So that's been a very successful. So, yes, we're getting there. But this story is important, I think, because the church almost closed. And the big question that I usually get is, how do you keep going? The congregation is very, very small. 30 to 40 on a Sunday, 140 on the books. And we do a lot of things. How do we do that? We partner with other nonprofits to get volunteer help, and we have an endowment. And that endowed money pays the upkeep on this very large building is, you know, phenomenal. So, when I first came, there was a family that had a nativity collection. And we said, we have to have a nativity festival. Even people that don't go to church will celebrate Christmas. They'll come to the nativity festival and we'll give them the word of Jesus. And we're there, let's do it. And so we took this family's nativities, and I went to Joann Fabrics and I bought cute little fabric and I matched it up, and we thought we were great. That was 2017. And then I met a group called Friends of the Creche. This is an international group of collectors that really study nativities, and they're very knowledgeable. They just last week had a convention in Cleveland, but they meet all around the world. And after attending one of those conventions and getting their twice-a-year magazine, I began to realize there's so much to learn about nativities that help you understand not only the Christmas story, but the cultural things about Christ for the whole world. We needed to do, I call them edu-concerts, where we're educating people about the nativities. And then we recently inherited a permanent collection from the Bowles family. And Anna Mae Bowles, who looks just like you would think Anna Mae might look, she passed away last September, and they had 1,000 nativities in their basement. Now they counted all the little ornaments and all the little bells, but it was a big collection. She worked at Flower Hospital, and when their gift shop at the end of the season had things marked down 60%, she would buy the nativities. That's how it started. And then family members and friends, and the collection kept growing. So they asked us if we would take this collection, and after a lot of prayer and thought, because it's a kind of a big responsibility, we decided that the church would take that on as a new ministry. And that we would, because of the tourism area where we're located, we now have cruise ships coming in, we have bus tours coming in, and that we would try to include a year-round program to come and see the nativities and learn more about this. So that's how we got into the nativities. So I'll show you a few things from the collection. One thing that's interesting to look at is how the clothing of these different nativities and where they're from. This is obviously Korea. This is Japan back there. This is Bolivia. See the headgear? And so here's kettle cloth from Africa. Everybody laughs at this. You don't see too many baby Jesus portrayed that way. That's Peru. The ethnic representations and in terms of physical features. This is a black Madonna from Ethiopia. This is not Maui. Oh gee, I just forgot. It's a South African country that starts with M, but it's not Maui. Okay, sorry. Regional animals. This is a set from Australia. The kangaroo is Joseph. The little hedgehogs in the bottom. And the materials that they're made out of and why. This is, I don't know if any of you ever remember, that's a sugar ornament. My father-in-law used to make these every year, a sugar mold, and then this is royal frosting, and then he would put different pictures of the nativity inside. Anybody ever remember sugar ornaments? Oh, one person. Yeah. And so this is from Arizona area, so you have a little bit of turquoise in there. This is recycled paper from Haiti, which often you see at the gift shops where, you know, with the third world countries. This is banana leaves, a little bit hard to tell, dried banana leaves. This is soapstone from India, Pakistan area, and soapstone is a very interesting material because you're basically digging a pit, dropping ladders in, and younger men are climbing down these ladders and chiseling out the stone, bringing it up on buckets, but over time, the stone reforms slowly. It's a soft stone, and after it's polished, and you can even kind of see it change color, it gets a little bluer over time. It's still gray, but it gets a little bit bluer gray. It's real soft to the touch, so that's an interesting. So many different crafting and carving ways. This is corn husk dyed. This is repose, which is taking metal and hammering it in a mirror kind of relief on wood. how they're stylized. Are they abstract? Are they very traditional? This is a very contemporary styling, all white. This open mouths, this is the storyteller tradition. So many of the South American nativities will have their mouths open because they're telling the story of Christ being born. Some of the scale, you can't tell, but this is 2 feet high. This you need a magnifying glass to see. There's such a variety in sizes and styles, and we put magnifying glasses out so you can see some of the details on these little miniatures. The color palette varies so much. This is Turkey. The national flower of Turkey is the poppy. And then this is a small Hummel set on the other side. So, of course, the Hummel colors are very muted. So the Fontanini pictures that I talked about, their nativity sets include many of these things, local villagers, musicians, and you will probably have seen that's a very European, Italian look. We have, I think, 5 different sets of these, and I don't know if you can tell, he's a flute player, and he's selling garlic. They have gone through, and of course, based more on European tradition, but tried to include villagers in their scene. Some of the settings are also kind of interesting for nativity festivals, like this is one from Alaska on this side, and then this one from the Philippines, where some of the houses are elevated on stilts. You see they're elevating their manger on stilts, and this is on stilts. So that's another thing to look at. This I put in just because it's, you know, it's made out of clay and it's from out west. So you know, of course, you see the cow. And this is an origami, but it's a folded paper, but this has been cast in porcelain based off of paper folded origami. So there are some nativity sets that reflect social scenes, messages of peace, immigration. This is the Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. They have staged their nativity this way since 2003 because of the wars. And so instead of setting up their whole creche, they have laid baby Jesus in the rubble. And we have a Christmas tree that I built like this with our nativities from the west coast of Africa. They make their Christmas trees out of the plastic that washes up along the coastline. My brother was just in Singapore. I don't think I have the picture. No, he just sent it to me. He just sent me a picture from a hotel, and the Christmas tree was made out of styrofoam egg cartons as a reminder and protest to not buy plastics and styrofoam. I thought that was interesting that that was coming from Singapore. So the Fontanini, here's a little bit more where you see some of the figures and the people that display these, yes, you can buy a little workbench. You can buy a little, so there's wood in there, a little oven. But a lot of people that have these large, expensive collections will really hand make a lot of the pieces to try to get the entire look of the village. Now the Fontanini creators are in Italy, and they've done a lot of research. This has been around since 1908, and a lot of these figures are hand painted, and they're designed by a sculptor first. And their store is remarkably small. It's like not much bigger than this room. They don't do tours. They're very private. There's not much on their website. Very old school. And, you know, this is one of the workers, this Elio Simonetti, and Mr. Fontanini, who's now probably in his 70s. He's the 4th generation. He comes to the United States once a year and brings their new figures. They make a couple new figures every year. So he always goes to Bronner's, up in Michigan, and he goes to a Christmas store in Indianapolis. And there's I don't remember the third place, but he usually comes and makes these 3 visits, and that's kind of it. They're not really big into the commercial aspect of it. Bronner's is probably one of their main things in the United States. But you can see the extensive, over the years, the number of figures that have been created. And you can go on eBay and find some of these figures and see how the colors have changed just a little bit over the years. And they have a 5-inch size, a 7.5-inch size, and then you can get larger sizes if you're displaying something in a big space like a church. So when we talk about daily life in Bethlehem, you would think that if you went to Bethlehem, you would see that. But what's happened over the years is that they've built churches over every historic thing that ever happened in Israel, pretty much. So if you want to go to the birthplace of Jesus, this is the church that's been built over it. And if you get down on your knees and look inside, that's the place that they think Jesus was born. So you don't get a feeling of what was Bethlehem, the village, like. You know, what were the people like at the time? So this year at our church, we usually focus on a hymn every year. And so for this year, we picked a little town of Bethlehem because we've expanded the Nativity Festival. And so one thing that we're trying to learn about and teach is a great line from this song, "The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight," because when you're walking by a nativity set or you're hearing the Christmas story, there's an awful lot that the Sunday school version doesn't include. Does that make sense? We know there was 3 wise men and, Joseph, there wasn't room in the inn and, But there's a lot more research that's been done lately that doesn't really deny that version of the birth of Christ, but we know more now than we did. And so just to remember, Joseph and Mary went from Nazareth to Bethlehem, so they had to go near Jerusalem. And what I didn't put on here is where Elizabeth was. Remember, Mary went to stay with Elizabeth, and she was very close to Bethlehem. I should put that on there. So the roads may have looked similar to this. So my husband and I were fortunate in October to go to Greece and Crete and some of those places. And it's very different because they haven't spent the time and the money to build up around some of these famous structures. Like if you want to go to the Parthenon and you want to climb 300 steps, have at it. There's no railing, there's no fee, you're on your own. So there are places where the topography is so similar that you get a better sense of what Bethlehem looked like. And there are even still in existence some road markers. This says Caesar, Emperor, that are still in existence along the side of the road. So the Roman Empire looked like this at the time of Christ. And it was huge. And Jerusalem was conquered just about 50 years before Jesus was born. And it was a brutal, brutal time. Pompey the Great led this invasion to destroy Jerusalem. 48,000 Roman soldiers were in Judea at this time, and the population of the Jewish population was 23,000. So 2 to 1. And Gentiles, Jewish tradition, completely opposite of what they were used to. Here's Herod the Great. And, there were some good things about Herod. Not many, but a few. He had been described as being healthy and fit, and he led his armies into 10 different battles successfully, and he was a great builder. But as time went on, he kind of deteriorated, and he became so cruel. Here's one of the Fontanini figures depicting Herod and the Roman soldiers. Herod was big into building, and so a lot of the farmers in Bethlehem and craftsmen were taken away from their homes to build, this is Masada, these huge fortresses for Herod. This is his summer palace, and this is the underground heating steam system for his baths that has been unearthed. So this left, this was the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, a mammoth structure that all was underway when Christ was born. So a lot of these families from town were struggling to survive, and then the loss of the male member of the family who was helping with the gardening, helping with the animals, and those sorts of things, it was difficult. Herod had 10 wives, several were killed. This was his favorite wife, and she and her 2 sons were strangled. And then after that, he missed her, and he would send his servants to go find her, and when they couldn't find her, he would have the soldiers beaten and thrown into jail. It was not a good ending for Herod. I could go on for Herod about a long time, but when he was on his deathbed, he didn't think anybody was going to grieve his passing. And he had 1,000 different temple priests and political figures and people like that arrested and put like in a coliseum. He was going to have them all slaughtered on the day that he died, so that all of Judea would be mourning these people and crying in the streets and for him, but really not for him. Yeah, there's just a lot of Herod stories. In a nativity set, when you see the Senate and people of Rome, that's a way to kind of designate what was happening. And these different things are the legions of Rome. And the 10th legion was the one stationed in Bethlehem. Probably one of the more vicious of the legions. And so in this Fontanini set, so they're buying these figures, but this person has staged and built a lot of this himself to tell the story. There's so much artwork about the assassination of the boys under age 2. When the wise men came and Herod asked them to come back and report to him when they had found the baby Jesus, and the wise men didn't, they went on to Egypt, Herod had boys killed. And there's just so much artwork depicting this. Now, Bethlehem at the time was probably only 300 people. So how many boys would there have been? Maybe only 12 or so. They don't know. But the event, the magnitude of this event has prompted hundreds of years of artwork because of its cruelty. And another reason for this artwork, this is medieval, there was a great movement for people to compare the coming of Jesus with Moses. Remember, Moses had baby boys drowned in the Nile and the girls saved. So Herod has had these boys killed, and just like Moses saved the Israel people at one time, Jesus was going to be the one to save Israel this time. But there was a little bit of a problem in that thinking, in that the Gospels are very, very clear. Jesus did not just come to save them from Roman oppression. He came to save us from our sins. That is not what people in Bethlehem were expecting. Here's a good picture of some of the workers, the Fontanini workers. Oh, this is Herod Achilles, Herod the Great's son. He was even worse than Herod. So the fear was unspeakable brutality by the Romans. The hope, what Jesus is the new Moses to set the people free from Roman oppression. But how do we think of it in today's times? This was a story told by Desmond Tutu when he was in South Africa during apartheid. his description of being an oppressed people was like that of an elephant stepping on the tail of a mouse. And you're telling the mouse that Jesus is here to save you from your sins. What? The mouse is looking for somebody to get rid of the elephant. And that's what the Jewish people were expecting Jesus to do. So Desmond Tutu said, first you have to remove the elephant from the mouse, and then you start talking about Jesus came for both, the oppressed and the oppressor. So you see the conflict that kind of led to Jesus having trouble with the Pharisees and Sadducees and Levitical law. And, you know, he was born in a very brutal times, and he died in very brutal times on a Roman cross. So you can see how part of that, how that happened is because there were differences in what the people thought Jesus was going to be for them. So we connect at our Nativity Festival, we always connect the cross with the manger because they are connected. And the first time I saw this, I thought, what? It's not Easter. What do we have the cross here for? I wanted the little sheep. But they really are very connected. And so we've decided to stay with that. Joseph went up from Galilee. He was from the house and lineage of David. Oh, you know, did you ever read through the begats at the beginning? All these men. So the father, the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so. Well, that was your identity. The male of the family was the identity. So Joseph, as the male, had to go to Bethlehem to register. But there were some knots in that family tree. And in Matthew, he mentions 5 women. That seems like nothing to us. It was amazing that there were women listed in that family tree. Not only that, most of these women were Gentiles or married to Gentiles. This was earth-shattering at that time. So you've got Rahab, you've got Ruth, you've got Bathsheba, who married David, Mary at the front, Tamar up at the top. I mean, those are long stories. That's Sunday school for another time. But it was just very shocking to people to see that these women were included in the family tree. Now, in this verse, how silently the wondrous gift is given, I don't know. There's a lot of women in this room that just are going to agree with me. There is nothing silent about having a baby, you know, and then you throw in shepherds running in and angels screaming from the sky. Yeah, this was a man who wrote this hymn. So when I thought about it, though, the most silent person in the whole story is probably Joseph. He doesn't get much credit. We don't know much about Joseph. There's an assumption that he was an older man. But when you think about it, he's described as being just and righteous. So how does that work when he's told by an angel that Mary is with child? So the Greek word, well, let's start with Mary. When the angel visits Mary, it describes her as she pondered all of these things in her heart. And what's the Magnificat? I will do as you asked me to do. I'm not saying the words right, but you know what I mean. She was obedient. She was compliant. The words that describe Joseph, when the angel came to him and told him about Mary, the word is anger, the same word that's used describing Herod when the wise men didn't return to him. It's the same Greek word. So Joseph's initial reaction may have been anger, but we know that he transformed that anger into grace. Because if it wasn't for Joseph, Mary and Jesus probably both would have been killed or stoned. She was outside the traditional custom of being pregnant while engaged. And so that's a good picture of the angel appearing to Joseph. This is probably telling him the flight to Egypt because the baby's already born. It's so hard to see right there. But I think and the reason I put this picture in, because you see all the tools. We just know Jesus as a carpenter, but in that day and age, the word carpenter was probably handyman. He could probably cut stone, build. I mean, he wasn't a finished carpenter to do your cupboards. He was probably a very general workman. We know he wasn't a rich man because when they presented Jesus at the table, they couldn't buy a lamb. They offered a dove as a sacrifice, so they were never wealthy. But he had the courage to withstand the pressures of the culture and able to process his anger into grace and make this all happen. Now, from Sunday school pageants, we seem to get the idea that Joseph came totally unprepared. Mary's going to have this baby. He's made no accommodations. He runs to an inn. There's no room. What's he do? Maybe not so much. Some of the biblical scholars are saying the days were accomplished, as written in Luke. He was from the house of David. He's going into a small town where his relative was the most famous king of Israel. People are not going to throw him out in the street. He didn't even need to bring Mary because as the male heir, he was the one that needed to register for the census. Maybe he brought Mary because he didn't want to leave her alone, wondering what might happen to him. But obviously, Mary's family was accepting of Mary. She went and stayed with Elizabeth. They both, there was nothing in the Bible to indicate that there was a problem. And so if there wasn't if there was a problem in Jerusalem, he could have just gone 3 miles down the road to Elizabeth's house. So there is some thought that while the Sunday school pageant is a little more dramatic, I need an inn, he probably was there and plenty of time to prepare. So here's where the fun part is. The word for inn in Greek describes the Inn of the Good Samaritan, where it was a paid inn, kind of a commercial inn, let's say. This is the present-day road to Jericho. See how desolate it is? But the word used for the inn in the Mary and Joseph story is Catalina or Cataluna. And it is described as a family guest room or a cave because many houses were built either out from or very close to caves where the animals were kept. Depending on how much money you had, you could build a two-building structure if you were wealthier. If you weren't as wealthy, then you were probably attached to a cave. And remember, a lot of houses were destroyed during these wars leading up to the birth of Christ. And so people lived in caves until they could afford to build something to live in. So the other use of the word kataluma is when Jesus is talking to his disciples. And it's close to Palm Sunday. And he says, "Where is the guest room that I might eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large room upstairs." Kataluma, all furnished, met preparations there. It's the same word as the inn in the Jesus story. So it probably wasn't a commercial inn. It was probably referring to a guest room in a house. And the guest room was probably full. And most homes had some sort of manger affair. The goats, if you were lucky, maybe a couple sheep, were all part of the family daily activity and to survive. And those animals provided warmth. The animals had a manger for food. So this book called The Infancy Gospel of Jesus, it's not really a book and it's not part of the Bible, but it's this anonymous man who claimed to be James, but a lot of people just use famous people's names when they wrote. Nobody really thinks James the Apostle wrote this. But he takes the Christmas story and elaborates on it. And this story then got translated into many languages. And some of the popes back in the day were there, not so sure about this, but it took off. It was a good novel. So I equate this to the present day Wicked. E.L. Baum wrote a simple story in 1910, and then Hollywood made it into a cool movie with Judy Garland in 1939. Ooh, they added color. And then, oh, let's make it into a musical in 2000. Oh, it's even better, add songs. And then Hollywood takes it one step further, and it's a great movie. It'll take us over 2 parts in 3 years. And let's add sets. It's kind of like that. It was like the Christmas Story, and then it got a little bigger. And then Francis of Assisi said, okay, let's do it live action. Let's get some real sheep in here, and let's stage it like the Bible says. And people all over Europe said, oh, this is a great idea. But a few years went by, and we're tired of asking people to come in and bring their animals. We'll just carve them. We'll just make that. We'll make the nativity out of stuff. And it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And Christmas stories have gotten more elaborate. And so nobody in our Christmas story talks about how oppressed the people were, how cruel Herod was, how they longed to be saved from this oppression. And instead, we get, Joseph running around looking for a place to stay. So you get it. So, back to the hymn. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. There's so much artwork with angels and shepherds, just so much. It was hard to pick one, but I kind of like this one. And I carry a torch for the shepherds. They're always the bumbling ones, the funny ones, the ones that don't know anything. But in reality, a lot of the shepherds were the town musicians. They had all this time out in the field. They're making their own instruments. I see a lot of blinking going on. I have a Mac, and this system does not like Macs. So they were known in town. Yes, they may have been a little, not the normal Bethlehem people, but they were certainly well known as musicians. And there's a great thought that the shepherds around Bethlehem were Levitical shepherds. Oh, come on, don't do it. The fields around Bethlehem, called Shepherd's Fields, is where lambs were raised to be sacrificed in Jerusalem on the holy days. So these little lambs were protected and guarded to be unblemished as a sacrifice. And this is the Tower of Migdal Eder. There's remnants that are kind of still there. And this is where the shepherds would kind of check the babies after birth, check the lambs after birth, prepare them for sacrifice. And what do you know? Stone manger. What do you know? Swaddling cloths hanging inside the tower so they could wrap these newborn lambs in swaddling cloths so they'd be unblemished. They would have nothing, no marks on them, no broken bones. They could be prepared for a sacrifice at the temple. Are you getting the connection? Yeah, Jesus, the sacrificial lamb. So when the angels told the shepherds, you'll find the baby wrapped in swaddling cloths lying in a manger, it's like, hello, we get that. They're understanding the connection. And I think there's a case to be made when you read some of these authors that go into the house and find the baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. This was a comfort zone for them. If they're thinking this baby is going to be born as a king, they're not going to be comfortable going into a palace. But they're very comfortable going into a home where there's a baby in a manger. And the shepherds leave praising God. So they had a good time when they were there. So, all good. This is one of the Fontanini scenes. And see, this person has made kind of a combination of a cave and a house and the shepherds. I like this version. They've got a lot of cool parts of the story all shown. Don't know why I put that in there. Except that Bethlehem, the house of bread, it becomes central to the Christmas story, why it was Bethlehem that was chosen. So close to Jerusalem and the beginning of Jesus' ministry. So King David also came from the town of Bethlehem, so that was very important. And I love how the Fontanini sets then try to portray the village. And, look at the expressions. They're obviously taking it also from a European point of view, but you can kind of make the jump and see how some of Bethlehem may have been the same way. Now, this is also from our trip. They must have had so many water jugs because there's so many still in existence. And they held grain, they held oil, they held water. And if you think of the daily life of these women, getting up, getting water for bathing, for cooking, for the animals, and they're making several trips to fill these jugs. No woman is carrying this massive clay jug up and down to the city well. I love some of the houses with the, no air conditioning, so you've got open air for the wind to blow through and cool down. And when you look at some of the structures of these old buildings and how they were put together and how these little things were filled with stone, more jugs. So I put this in here. This is Rome, because Herod, Pompey destroyed Jerusalem. Herod was trying to rebuild it, but he was rebuilding it to look like Rome. And it didn't quite happen that way, but that was his goal. I don't know how this will work with the Mac. There, it'll show just a quick. These are some of the ruins in Rome, but you can kind of see how that would have been in Jerusalem with everything so close together. The columns and the support and things like that. There's a temple. So here's Bethlehem, this little village next to Jerusalem, which is being rebuilt. And I just think that's part of the Christmas story, that we don't see the difference between the grand living of the city of Jerusalem and the massive temples that were there and the common, simple life of an everyday Bethlehem villager. So it's all part of the whole story of Christ. You have his lineage, Jew and Gentile, male and female, rich and poor, that Jesus came for everyone. And it's the story of salvation and eternal life. So hopefully that makes sense to you. It was a long, winding path. But it's now our goal at St. Paul's and Hart Gallery that we try to continue to share this Christmas story. And it's our hope to build a set similar to this. We have, my husband and I have quite a few figures, and it takes a lot of research of how we want it to look. We've designated an area in the church, and so right now we have about 700 nativities on display, partly from this collection that I mentioned from Anime, and then other people in the church. And so like some of the slides we saw at the beginning from different countries and all around the world, it's a really beautiful thing to contemplate how people all over the world have their own view on the same story, but it just all comes full circle. So anybody have any questions? I invite you to come to Toledo.
What are the hours of that?
Well, I have cards here if you'd like. Public hours are 4 to 7 on Fridays and Sundays, but we have a lot of groups that come on. Like I'm leaving right now because there's a group coming in at 1:30. So I'll leave these up here if anybody's interested. We also have, like on Friday nights, we have carols and cocktails. Oh, can I say that at Lakeside? But we have different bands coming in, and then we sing carols, and on Sundays we have candlelight concerts. So this Sunday is a brass quintet and organ, next Sunday is a string quartet, and then Trans-Siberian Solstice is they play Trans-Siberian orchestra music. It's not the big national one, but they play all the same music. John?
That fragment you had, it looks like a codex, like from James. It looks like it's Greek.
Yes.
Where is that?
Where is it located? Okay, you need my husband to answer that. I don't know for sure. I should have brought with me some of the books I read. So what happened is in March, I was playing basketball with grandsons, and I fell and shattered my elbow completely. So all of this is now metal. So for 8 weeks, I was cast, I had to sleep sitting up like this till the ligaments all healed. And the most comfortable place in the house was my husband's den. And so it's either watch TV or stare at all of his books. And so after a while, I just started reading all of his books. And he's the expert, the theological expert, not me, but I really, really liked some of these books that were written from the Mideastern point of view. And that particular author, I can't remember, but I'll give you a card. If you want to email me, I can tell you. I can answer that question for you. It's a very good book, and he also talks about, he goes beyond the birth and talking about the Beatitudes and some of just the archaeological research from Israel and how it relates to the Bible stories. I'm sorry, I can't answer that right now.
Would you not recommend little kids coming through that?
Oh, no, little kids are great. We have a scavenger hunt, and we have a kids' activity area, and cookies, hot chocolate, food.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it was too precious to get out.
No, people are very, very, well, okay. What time is it? Do we have time? There is a set from Catalonia in Spain, and their tradition, they have all these figures from everybody in the village. And there is one called literally the crapper, because it's their tradition that if you, I don't know how to say this, but if you fertilize your fields yourself, that you will have a good harvest. And it brings great, not only harvest, but, and so one of the characters has a little red cap and a white shirt, and his pants are down. And in Catalonia, it's always depicted by the manger because this is a sign of honor. Well, so we put it out, and I have a little story about it. Every single time somebody turns that around, they're upset. So we also have a millennial nativity set that the three wise men are holding Amazon boxes and they're on Segways. And Joseph's taking a selfie with him and Mary, and the cows have an organic stamp on them, and there's a solar panel on the manger. Some people get a little bit bothered by not having the traditional look, but I think it's just part of embracing the whole story. I didn't put that in because I was nervous if somebody might not like that.
Is your display year-round?
So it will, the second floor will be now a permanent installation. If you come to the Nativity Festival now, it's over 4 floors and 9 rooms. And so that will not all be out all year, but a good portion of it will be. Yeah, and was there another question?
Well, kind of the same question, but I have another story, if you don't mind. I really appreciated the Toledo portion of your story,
Okay.
and especially about the Polish neighborhood and St. Hedwig. My husband's grandmother lived in the alley behind St. Hedwig's Church, and the last time I went in there before it closed was for her funeral.
Oh.
So when her only son, my father-in-law, was in the war, she had a creche in her living room, and instead of shepherds, she had toy soldiers around to remind her that there were not only shepherds in the fields, but people fighting. So
Wow.
And we have that creche now, and we put the soldiers out every year. So I just really appreciate all the stories of all your creches.
That
It
is
brought
a
back a
very
lot of
good
memories. Thank
story.
you.
Yeah. Our pastor is from Australia, and they do Christmas in Australia is Barbie on the beach, a barbecue. They call it a Barbie, not the doll. And so his crush is very different too. It's just it has a barbecue with It's fun to hear the different cultural traditions. Well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate sharing this story. And if anybody wants a card, they're sitting up here. And if you take a card and have my email, I'll answer your question for you.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
great.
Thank you.
I like this little pointer gizmo.